The Evolve to Succeed podcast, where founders, entrepreneurs, business leaders and experts are interviewed to explore the link between personal and business success. We will also investigate and establish the need for ongoing personal development, accountability and support. The objective is to inspire you, the audience, to be better in life and in business. Welcome to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My guest on this week's episode is Chris Croft, one of the UK's leading business trainers. To date, Chris has trained some 87,000 people face-to-face and over 6 million people online. He's also a successful author. His first book, Time Management, was published in 1996 to wide acclaim and has since followed this with 14 other publications. It is Chris's expertise in time management, personal growth, and achieving true happiness that we're going to discuss in this podcast. During the course of the discussion, we also hear about Chris's personal journey and some of the lessons he's learned along the way. Chris is a really passionate, energetic and expressive individual who I've known for more than 20 years, and I'm sure you'll enjoy his stories and his outlook on life. Amongst other things, Chris talks about the impact of poor influencing when managing people.
You know, if you force people to work, when you're not there, they'll stop working. Whereas if you can get them to care, then they'll do it even when you're not there.
Discusses the challenges and value of effective delegation.
So if they can do it 80% as well as you should give it to them. And just don't look at that last 20%, just think it's good enough. And then they'll get to 90, 100, they'll probably get to 120, which will feel great.
And tells us the important lesson he learned at his Cambridge University reunion.
So I was fascinated to see the cream of England's education, and there they were, not particularly successful monetarily and not particularly happy either.
To find out more about Evolve, go to evolvemembers.com. But for now, let's get on with the show. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Hello, Warren. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it was great to have you on the podcast. And I was reflecting when I first met you, Chris. And I'm going to age us both now. Although you haven't looked at your look hasn't changed in the 20 years since I first met you, Chris.
Is it 20 years?
Yeah, I met you. I was at Grant Thornton, so I was in my corporate days, and you came into Grant Thornton on a strategic away day and gave us training and coaching around team engagement, how to work better as a team, and also around sales training. So that's when I first met you, and I can't believe it's 20 years ago. As I was driving into work today, I reflected and it was 20 years ago. So for our listeners, Chris, do you want to tell them a little bit about Chris Croft and your journey?
Well, what a question.
Start?
Yeah, how much detail do you want? Chris Croft, yes, age 60. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm still 12 in my mind.
Yeah.
So I started out as an engineer. I did a degree in engineering at Cambridge, which was good. Carol Vorderman was my lab partner.
Okay.
We were all in love with Carol.
Wow.
I don't think she'd remember me, but I remember her. But apart from Carol, I didn't really enjoy engineering. I was a terrible engineer. I mean, engineers are very good at detail. And I only did it because I happened to be good at maths and couldn't think of what else to do. And I think at that age, you're just thinking, what on earth shall I do as my career?
Yeah.
And so I picked it and then went to work for Westland Helicopters because helicopters are kind of fun and interesting things. And I was an apprentice there and I worked in all the different departments and I had this increasing sense of desperation as I didn't fall in love with each department.
It was going to be a department. The next one I'm going to love.
Yeah, and I just thought it's got to be something. Helicopters are brilliant and beautiful, but the design office, my plan was to design helicopters. And I thought in the first week, I'll do a normal one, get my eye in. The second week, I'll do a double decker. Third week, I'll do one shaped like a fish or something. And I discovered that they make one new helicopter design every 10 years. And it takes 300 people 10 years.
Wow.
And if you're lucky, by the time you get to the third one, you might be in charge of, the back wheel or something. Right. And I just thought, sod that.
That wasn't going to hold your attention.
No. And I remember, the technical drawing exam we had to do at university, we had to do 3 drawings in 3 hours. And so we did a drawing per hour for the exam. And when I got to Westlands, the first morning, I did 4 drawings before lunchtime. And this old bloke came over and said, "You're one of them troublemakers, aren't you, from university?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, in this office, we do one drawing a week. So you better not cause any trouble. And I went, all right then. So each week I used to do my drawing between 9 and 10 on Monday morning. And then I used to just skive the rest of the week.
Wow.
And I used to sleep in the waste paper skip with my shirt off and things. It was just, and I just thought, I can't be in a drawing office where you do one drawing a week. I just can't. But I eventually found production.
Okay.
And that was exciting because everything was going wrong the whole time. And everything was always late. And I became fascinated with why can't they make a helicopter on time?
Yeah.
You know, how hard can it be to have all the bits there ready and assemble it and it be done? And it is actually really difficult for all sorts of reasons.
You think about that out as well, did you?
Yeah, and computers were just being invented then because it was like mid-1980s, and computers were going to save everything, except of course they didn't.
No.
And it was, so that was actually fascinating. So just as a sort of something to be interested in, production is never boring.
No.
But then, so I did that, and I moved jobs a few times, and I found myself in charge of about 200 people who all called me sir and things, and it was just weird. And I remember thinking, you know, because power doesn't really do anything for me at all. And I just thought, why do I want to be in charge of 200 people? And they all bring you their headaches every day. And every day somebody turns up drunk and somebody has a fight and a machine breaks down and you run out of material and a supplier lets you down. And I just thought, do I want to spend my whole life, you know, wading through poo? Really, it was kind of how it felt.
In summary, how you got to.
And I had two horrible bosses in a row who used sort of fear as a way to motivate. And I'm fairly immune to other people. I don't really care what they think or say, usually. But it's amazing how a bad boss can get to you if they constantly grind you down.
We all remember them, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, one of them I was running a company in Wales and used to phone me up from head office in Northampton and call me an effing Welsh bee. And I'm not even Welsh, but you Welsh. And
there was a bit of your history that I wanted to explore then, because I didn't think you were Welsh.
Because I was working in Wales, I was sort of lumped in with, you bloody... And it was the early days of mobile phones, and he would be swearing at me from some motorway somewhere, you know, and he'd go dead every time he went under a motorway bridge, and he'd be back, you better effing sort out that effing problem. And it's amazing how that does gradually get to you. And he used to threaten to fire me every month. He'd say, if you don't reach the numbers, I'm going to sack you. And then we didn't, because there were loads of problems in this company. I'd just taken it over, was trying to sort it out, no time to do it, no money to invest, and it was just pretty much impossible. Yeah. And he would just shout and swear at me over the phone. And so after I left that job, I went to work for Dolphin Packaging and Pool, which was a similar nightmare. And so after both those jobs, I just thought, I don't want to spend my whole life doing this. And surely there's something better. And there was a job advertised at Bournemouth University as a lecturer in operations management, which was what I knew about. And oddly enough, my next door neighbour brought the paper around and said to me, look at this, Chris, here's the perfect job for you. I didn't even like my next door neighbour. I never really spoke to him. But for some reason, he brought the paper around and said, look at this. And I said, well, I can't be a lecturer. I don't have a qualification in teaching. He said, you don't need one. And I was like, really? He said, go and be interviewed, try it. So I did. I don't know, I just did what he told me, which was really odd. And I got the job. And so suddenly there I was as a university lecturer on quite a lot less money, but a lot more holidays. Yeah. And it was such a fun job. And it was like finally discovering the thing you were born to do. And I do actually believe that there is an ideal job out there for everyone. And you've got to keep trying to find it.
Only one?
I don't know if there's only one ideal job. And I don't know if there is a job for absolutely everyone. But I think for a lot of people, there's at least a better job than the one they're doing.
Something that they feel passionate about and engaged with. And
I think because the job I do now, where I go around and do training courses and I see probably 3,000 people a year, I see a lot of people who, and they open up to me on courses and they tell me stuff, you know, and you get a lot of people who they don't hate their job. I mean, some people hate their job and do nothing about it. But a lot of people just settle for a job that's sort of okay because they have to pay the bills. And I just think you're spending 5 days a week doing a job and you've got to find a job that you love. And the search must go on. And it took me years to find the ideal job for me, which I'm lucky enough to have found. But I don't think it is luck. I think it was because I was sort of relentless enough to keep looking, or stupid enough, because I did get made redundant 3 times. Because the guy in Wales, eventually, they closed the whole company down.
Right, just wasn't going to turn around.
Yeah, they got me to get rid of everyone, and then they got rid of me. But I'm glad, because that moved me from Wales to here. And nothing wrong with Wales. It's beautiful, actually. The people were really friendly. But it moved me to here, which has been a great place to be here in Bournemouth. And then Dolphin Packaging also ended in... I argued every step of the way with the boss because I believed he was wrong about lots of things.
Right.
So, he used to just fire people if he didn't like the look of them. And I would oppose that and say, no, he's a really good guy. He'd go, no, I don't care, get rid of him.
Right.
Firk him off is the expression he used to use. Just firk him off, Chris.
Right.
And I'd be going, and it was
very old school.
Oh, it was really old school. I mean, we used to run the machines with I'm sure they don't do it now, legal disclaimer, but we used to run the machines with the guards off because it was quicker. Right. And people's fingers used to get cut off. I mean, it was literally that crazy. And I fought him every step of the way. I totally disagreed with him about all sorts of things. I used to put a notice up once a week to tell the guys in the factory what was going on in the company about we're hoping to get a new order, we're buying a new machine, etc.
Just good communication.
Yeah, and he said to me, don't put the notice up because they don't need to know and they'll only find a way to use it on us. And I disobeyed him. So I used to put the notice up in the evening after he'd gone home. So the evening shift could see it. Then the night shift would come in and see it. And then the morning shift would come in at 6 a.m. And they had instructions to take it down after they'd read it. Because he used to get in before me.
Right.
So they would take the notice down. So all of my guys could read my notice and the boss never knew. And if he found that out, he probably would have fired me.
Yeah.
But I felt that strongly about communication.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
it was just ridiculous.
It's at the heart of everything. And I don't think any business can tick or operate without strong... And meaningful,
and it's never good enough. Whenever you ask somebody, there's one thing in your company that should be better, they always say communication.
Yeah.
So I really believe in that. And he never discovered I was doing that, but I fought him every step of the way. And in the end, after a couple of years, he said, Chris, do you want to just have 6 months' money and go? And I went, yeah.
And then the university.
And then I went to work for the university, which was so much better. It was a joy working there. I mean, there was a certain amount of politics and stuff that was boring, but the teaching I just loved it.
Right.
And it was partly teaching on the MBA course, teaching operations management, and partly teaching local businesses for a day. So we would go out and do a day of something like time management for somebody like Grant Thornton.
Okay.
And that's how it started. So that second redundancy I'm eternally grateful for because it got me out of running factories and into training.
Right.
And otherwise, I'd still be there. I'd still be running that factory, almost certainly, because I wouldn't have had the guts or the vision to leave and do something totally different.
It usually is a critical event. It's something that happens, isn't it? And serendipity means you end up doing what you're doing. So at what point did you think the university lecturing wasn't your thing? And by the time I met you 20 years ago, you were Chris Croft training.
Well, what happened was I had gone from 40 grand to 20 grand back. This is 20 years ago. So I'd halved my pay because I just thought something's got to change. I'm going to start a new career, which takes a bit of courage, I guess.
Yeah, I assume you had a family because you got children. You had family.
Yeah, I've got 2 kids, mortgage, wife, dog.
Responsibilities.
In that order. And I was eating into my savings every month by a little bit. And I started to do the occasional training day on the side, which was not allowed, but everyone did it. It was like an unwritten rule that that's how they could employ good people on such low pay. It was an unwritten rule.
That
you could do a little bit of private work, a bit of consultancy, and it didn't harm the university at all. So I started doing the occasional day of training. I'd take a day of holiday and just go and do a day of training, and then just sort of write some sort of invoice on a bit of paper and they would send me money. And I wasn't self-employed or anything. I didn't really know what to even do with the money. I didn't have a company name or a bank account. It was just sort of weird. But I had to do something just to survive, really. And I remember at the time we were charging £1,000 a day to do a day for, let's say, Grant Thornton, which was, going rate probably. You've got 10 people on there, it's 100 quid a head, or 20 people, it's 50 quid a head, it's nothing.
Yeah.
So we were charging £1,000, and I was doing 100 days of training, and I was being paid 20 grand. So I was being paid 200 a day, and the university was charging 1,000. And I thought,
there might be an opportunity.
I thought if I was self-employed and I charged like 600 or 700, I'd be competitive. And I thought if I did 700 days, £700, and I did 100 days a year, I'd make 70 grand.
Yeah.
And that totally blew my mind, that thought.
Yeah.
That I could earn 70
Doing something
grand.
you loved.
Doesn't blow my mind. Yeah. Doesn't blow my mind now. But back then, I just thought, oh my God, I could do this. So I actually wrote resign in my diary. I planned when I was going to leave.
Right. Is that the engineer in you? Do you think there was a bit of you that is still very methodical?
I am still a bit of an engineer, I think, in terms of my thought process. I want to understand everything. And that's what engineers do.
Yeah.
And then I want to gradually improve everything, which is what engineers do as well.
Yeah.
Engineers are really great people, and they've created the whole world.
Yeah.
Although they're a pain in the arse to train, though.
Yeah.
Because
they
so
want
picky.
to know the infinite detail.
Yeah, and how do you know that's right? And what about that? The only people who are harder are lawyers, by the way, because they're like designed to argue and designed to find the one flaw in your argument. But yeah, so once an engineer, always an engineer, I think. Yeah.
So you'd written resign in your diary.
I'd written resign in my diary.
Your day.
And actually, I used to cycle to work if the weather was nice, and I got knocked off my bike by a car, which turned right and ran me over.
Wow.
And there was all this blood, and my arm didn't feel very good, and my bike was all bent, and this ambulance turned up, and they took me to Poole Hospital. And the ambulance guys were going, "You're Chris Croft, aren't you?" And I was going, "Yes." I was in agony. You did a training course for us. And I was going, "Was it any good?" And they went, "Yeah, it was really good." I was going, "Oh." And anyway, so turned out I'd broken my shoulder, my right shoulder, actually. I'm pointing to the wrong shoulder as we do this. And
our listeners can't see that.
I didn't have to say that. And so for the last sort of couple of months of my employment, I had my right arm in a sling. And it was a lovely hot summer. And I could have just taken 2 months off sick, but I didn't. Like an idiot, I honoured every training course I had booked, and I did them all. I wrote left-handed on the flip chart, really bad writing. I drove illegally, just left-handed, just changing gear and steering, and because my right arm was in a sling. Right. But I had to get to the customer.
You were committed.
And what an idiot! Because then, just when my arm was better, they called in this meeting and they said, "Really sorry, everyone, we're making you redundant." And I thought, that's what you get for loyalty. Yeah. And I learned a lesson then, actually, that your boss may love you, but your boss's boss doesn't really care about you, and your boss's boss's boss doesn't even know you exist. Right. You're just a number. And I know that's very cynical, but
it is a very cynical view.
Yeah, and obviously I hope I cared about my people, lay us down. Yeah. But that was possibly why I wasn't a great manager. I don't know. But then, we're into, do the good guys win or the bad guys win, don't we? And I've been teaching good management, I hope, for years now. But I do see quite a lot of bad managers still, people who use fear and things. And so
I think there is that corporate mentality. It's one of the reasons I left and set up Inspire. So I wanted to treat my people how I'd want to be treated and
but you're
treat them
unusual,
fairly.
Aren't you?
And instead of being dictated to. So I think there is some truth. Yeah, there is definitely some truth in what you say, Chris, because there is that dictation of how you'll deal with your people and how things will be dealt with and how you'll recruit people. And for me, I always had that passion. I wanted to get out and do it my way and treat people as human beings.
I think good managers can succeed, but I also think bad managers can succeed. But I also think maybe in the long run, you've got to have creativity, and you can't do it all yourself. You've got to get it from your people. And therefore, they've got to believe in what they're doing. So if you force people to work, it's all right if they're doing a routine task like turning a handle on a machine. But if you want creativity, you've got to inspire your people, haven't you?
Definitely.
And actually, even in something like a factory where you're turning handles, you've still got to keep ahead of your competition. You've got to keep improving. You've got to keep having ideas. And you can't have them all yourself. No. So it is madness to be a horrible manager, but we've all seen so many.
We have.
And I've had more than half of my managers have been really bad managers, really. So anyway, I was made redundant the third time, and that was the week before I was going to resign. But what I'll never know is whether I would have actually had the guts to resign and go self-employed. Because it's quite possible if I hadn't been made redundant the third time, I'd still be at the university, still lecturing. And,
because clearly you're committed to
enjoying
that role.
It, but I'd probably be on 25 grand now, on 20 or even 30. But because I did enjoy it. So my 3 redundancies took me from Wales to here, from manufacturing to teaching, and from teaching to being self-employed. And I can't thank those 3 people enough.
Everything happens for a reason.
And the reason I wanted to say about this was that if you are ever made redundant, don't worry about it, because it will probably lead to something better, because at least something different. And then it's what you make of it. And, I would still be in Wales, or I'd still be running that factory in Bournemouth with the guards off, or I'd still be teaching at the university, I think.
Yeah.
If I hadn't, because I don't think I've got the guts to just give up a job and go and do something totally different. I mean, not many people have, but I was pushed. But at least because I argued and was a pain and stood up for myself in those various jobs. And I think you've got to stand up for what you believe in whatever you do, because you've got to live with yourself, haven't you?
Yeah. You've got to have a conscience.
Yeah, but I am eternally grateful that sort of process of pushed me on to the endless search to find the right thing for me. But I did start to think, is there something wrong with me? Or am I not a very good person? Even though I always worked really hard in those jobs. Right. And I think I'm probably quite clever. So, clever and hardworking, what's not to like? Yeah. But I did start thinking, am I too abrasive? Because I do argue. If I don't agree with something, I'll say so.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably a good thing. I'd like to thank my mother for that, by the way, because I'm half Norwegian.
Okay.
And my mother is Norwegian. And in Norway, they say what they think.
Right.
And if you don't like it, that's fine.
Okay.
And they really...
So that's live with you as a trait.
They really do. If you go there, you'll find out the truth. If you smell, or if you are wearing something that doesn't suit you or anything, they'll just go, I wouldn't wear that.
Yeah.
Or, oh, that's a terrible haircut, or whatever it is.
Right.
You'll find out.
Okay, you'll know the truth.
So I think that has really helped. But what I just wanted to say really was that if you're made redundant, it's not you. I mean, it could be, but it probably isn't.
Yeah.
Because once you're self-employed, there's justice. If you're self-employed, you will either prosper or starve, depending on whether you're any good and whether you work hard and whether you do a good job.
Yeah, when you put the graft in.
Yeah, and I've been happily self-employed for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I can do it. And I feel good that I've sort of proved to myself I can survive. So therefore, those 3 managers who made me redundant must have been wrong. Or maybe I just didn't fit.
Yeah. It fits everything, isn't it? Yeah. And do you think you started your self-employed coaching business with an air of self-doubt in mind, or do you think that inner confidence was there?
In the middle, I think. I knew I could do it because I'd been running days while I was at the university, some on the side and some for the university, and they'd always gone fine. So I knew I could do it.
You could deliver.
But having said that, I nearly always have doubt before every day I do, even now after 20 years, actually. I always think, and something I have noticed, if I have to say 2 weeks off, or in the case of COVID, we've had about 6 months off, haven't we? But if I have 2 weeks off on holiday, I start thinking, I've got a time management course next week. What if I can't remember it? I do start, it's amazing how, if you're doing it every day, you don't have time to even think. You just turn up and do it. But after even a couple of weeks, you start to get nervous again. And that's what I tell people on my presentations course I run, which is that you will always be a bit nervous. But
you always have that little bit of
but in a way,
butterflies in the stomach.
But that's respect for the audience, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because if you care about it, you want it to be great. And I know I can do it 7 out of 10 and get away with it. But that's not good enough. I want it to be 9.5 or 10. And sometimes I do a day and it's only 9 and I kick myself and I think I should have spent longer on that and not so long on that. Oh, I should have. And so I'm hard on myself.
Right.
But the weird thing is the audience don't know. So sometimes they think a course was great and I think, I don't know. Yeah. And other times they say, well, it was all right. And I think, no, it was brilliant.
This is it. I delivered it. I nailed it today.
I nailed it and you didn't like it. But I think sometimes maybe you have to give them a hard time to really get them to question themselves. And they don't like that.
No.
And so, they don't always know what's good for them, or what I think's good for them might not be the same as what they want.
Yeah.
And also sometimes you have a very diverse audience. So you might have some with a really crazy sense of humor and a couple of very serious people. So you have a complete laugh and then a couple of serious people don't like it.
But that could be the same in managing a team, can't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's
and
the same
how do you
problem.
get that engagement?
How do you please all the people? And with training, you go into a room of 20 people and you don't know them at all. Weirdly, I feel I do know them because I do it every day. Somewhere deep down.
Traits.
Well, it's partly that, but partly just because I do it every day, something deep down makes me feel I already know them because I think they're the same people as yesterday.
Right.
In a weird way, even though I know they're not. So I go and go, hi guys, project management. We love Gantt charts, don't we? And they look at me like I'm some weirdo of what? we don't know you. But I feel I know them.
Yeah.
Because it's my world that I live in all the time. But to them, it's just a one-off. They've perhaps never been on a course before. And they don't even know, are they allowed to answer back? They don't know the rules. And I'm like, it's yet another course, here we go. And so it is weird because I don't know them, but I feel I do. And they could have all sorts of issues going on. I mean, once I was talking about push and pull influencing.
Yeah.
And I was saying, an example I quite like to use is speeding.
Okay.
Right? Because push influencing is where you force people to do something or not do something.
Yeah.
So that's where you have speed cameras and police hiding around the corner and stuff. Yeah. And then there's pull influencing, where you actually change how people feel about something. So that would be things like advertising, where you show what happens if you hit somebody at 40 rather than 30. Yeah. And you do remember that hammer that used to go into the peach? Do you remember that advert?
Yeah.
And that's pull, because once you've seen that, it changes you forever.
Yeah.
Whereas push, there's the police going past the window. Yeah, guilty conscience. But so those two methods. And the problem with push is that if you know the camera's switched off, you'll go past there at 90 again because they haven't changed how you feel.
The psyche hasn't changed.
Yeah. So you have to do it forever. And it's the same with management. If you force people to work, when you're not there, they'll stop working. Whereas if you can get them to care, then they'll do it even when you're not there.
Yeah.
So pull influencing is better, but more difficult because you have to get into the head of the person. How do you get someone to care? And that's quite difficult. Whereas to force them is easy. So I was talking about that, and this lady suddenly burst into tears and jumped up out of her seat and ran out of the room. And it turned out that her brother had been killed by a speeding driver the week before. God. But I didn't know that. No. And it was just an example I was using, and I wasn't condoning speeding, but even just mentioning that subject was enough to upset her, and she ran out of the room. Yeah. And so even before you start joking about stuff, you just don't know. I could joke about, a donkey or something, but maybe somebody got trampled to death by a donkey last week. You just don't know.
Yeah. You don't know your audience as you turn up.
No, you
and
don't.
What's going on in their lives.
And you can't start off by saying, what are the things I can't talk about today? Does anybody have any issues? You can't. You
Make it a very dull course.
Yes. And so one of my eternal dilemmas is whether to be quite beige and do courses that are like 7 out of 10 on the funometer. Or whether to sort of go for it and be at 9 out of 10 on the funometer and take a few risks and be a bit naughty, but keep people engaged and inspire them, really. But if you do that, there'll be one or two occasionally who don't like it.
Yeah. And I still remember, because you do make it fun. I still remember from that Grant Thornton course and the sales training, peeling the onion.
Yes. Oh, and did I do my dodgy demo? I asked one of the women out. Because I sometimes do that. And they say, well, you're not tall enough. And I go, well, how about if I stood on a chair?
Yeah.
And they go, no, you're too old. And I go, well, how about if I was younger? And you just handle every objection. And I occasionally do a dodgy demo. But the thing is, it's hilarious and everybody remembers it. Yeah. And I do say, look, don't chat somebody up in a nightclub like this. Yeah. It's just a demo.
But it's a really great concept, isn't it?
It is a great,
how do you get to the nub of the issue?
Yes, and if they say it's too expensive, never say, well, I could do it cheaper. Just say, apart from that, what do you think?
Yeah.
So you're not very tall. Apart from that, do you like me?
Yeah.
Because then if they say, well, if that's the only problem, then you can say, well, I could stand on a box. So, but the examples that you pick to illustrate a point.
Yeah.
The more hilarious they are, the more risk is that somebody will be offended and say, are you being heightist or whatever? And so, and of course, things have got more and more difficult in the last few years about what you can joke about. There's almost nothing. Yeah. I think you can joke about people being northern still.
Okay. Or if you're down in the south.
Yeah, I don't know. I secretly wish I was a northerner, actually. I sort of admire their toughness, but I don't know.
Sort of slight Norwegian in there.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I do think... And the problem is, if you train 3,000 people a year, the weirdest 1% are going to be quite weird. And there's 30 of them. In fact, the weirdest 1 in 1,000, 10th of a percent, there's going to be 3 of them a year that you're going to get.
Yeah.
And you don't know who they are. Is there one in the room today?
Yeah.
You don't know. And that person is going to take offense at something you say. I'll give you one example, actually, because I'm still thinking about this. I think it's interesting. I do a sales training course, and I've never actually done a sales job, but I have to sell a day of training every day as well as deliver a day of training every day. So I do know about selling, and I have to do it. And during my course, it all went really well. And at the end, there was one lady, it was a load of engineers. There was one woman, and she came up at the end and she said, I think your course was fascinating. I learned a lot, but I think it was a bit sexist. And I said, what do you mean? Because I was quite hurt by that, because I really don't think I'm sexist at all. I hope I'm not. And she said, well, you told 3 stories and they were all about male salespeople. So there's one about a BMW salesman who was totally useless, for example. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that just all 3 of those happened to be men. And they were all, by the way, about bad salespeople. And I was thinking, if I told a story about a woman who was a useless salesperson, would I have been accused of criticizing women? So what do you do? So I need a story about a good female salesperson. Now, I could tell a story that happened to be a man and change it so it's a woman. But I'd find that really hard to do, because all of my stories are real. And I'm living the story. I'm remembering.
Yeah, they're a part of your history or your
when
experiences.
I was there. And to change it and keep saying she instead of he would really mess with my head. It wouldn't be true, So I just thought, does it matter if all 3 of my stories are about men? And am I allowed to tell a story about a woman who performs badly? And, it's such a minefield.
Yeah.
And you'll never please all the people all the time. And even as I say this, half of your listeners are going, no, he should just, if it's men, he should say men. And the other half will be going, no, he should have a story about it. And you can't please everybody. It's so difficult when you get through a lot of people. Yeah. And in the end, I think the answer is probably to ignore the occasional person who's not happy. But I do find that hard because I care. Yeah. And I would love to say, I just think statistics, you're going to get that. But actually, it really bugs me if somebody complains about a day.
That's because you're passionate about what you do, though, Chris, and that's a good trait, isn't it?
Yes. And
you care. And
I've never got bored. Yeah. Like all my other jobs, within a few years, I thought, I hate turning up to this same office and these same people and these same problems. And every other job I've got bored with. But this, I've not got bored in 20 years. Wow. Which is amazing, really. And then I think it's because you have a different audience every day. Yeah. And it gives you a bit of a buzz. But also you are making a difference to people's lives. Like every now and then I meet somebody and they say, you did a course for me 10 years ago. Yeah. Sometimes actually we're out and about and somebody goes, oh, hi, Chris. Sometimes it's an attractive lady and she comes and goes, hi, Chris. And my wife's going, who's this? And I'm going, I've no idea.
Really? No, no idea.
Because they're looking at me for a whole day and I'm looking at a sea of faces. And then I do it again the next day and again the next day. So it's thousands of people a year. But they often say, I remember one thing you said on your training day.
So I remember peeling the onion.
Yes, and it's stuck with me all these years. And maybe you've used that technique, and it's probably made you thousands over the years, whatever. And just some little time management technique. If it just saves you a few minutes a day, it all adds up. And that makes it all worthwhile, I think, because it is. I think training is the best job in the world. I think it's fun, it's satisfying, it's easy. Really, because once you know your material, once you've done your course 10 times, you know it. And then you can focus on adapting to the audience and trying to understand them. And it just becomes easy and fun.
There's an art in it.
Yeah. It's also really well paid, which is, I don't know why. Well, I do know why, actually. It's because people only get one day. With consultancy, you've got somebody in for a few months and you want to watch the price carefully. But training, a few $100 either way doesn't matter because they're only coming for one day.
And if you've got testimonials and you can deliver value and you've proven that you can deliver value.
And the cost is spread over 20 people. Why would you not spend 50 quid training a person? If you're spending, 30 grand a year employing, it probably costs you 60 grand a year to employ that person with all the on cost. Why would you not spend 50 quid? It's like not putting oil in your Ferrari. Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to spend 5 quid on oil. And that would be mad. Yeah. And yet most companies, I read somewhere that the average manager gets half a day of training a year on average. And that's probably about right. They go on a training course every couple of years, which is
develop your people. You've got to believe in your people. You've got to develop them. You've got to make them better people.
Yeah. And so training's regarded as sort of optional extra, just a little corner of life. And I sort of joke that I just live off the crumbs from the big table, really, because training budgets are just tiny. Yeah. And yet it is incredibly important. And most people don't even really think about it. They just think, I probably should do some training. I'll get a guy in. And they don't really focus on it when really they should.
Yeah. So we have, one of my philosophies that we run through any business that I'm involved in is this kind of principle of a growth mindset.
Yes.
I've had that mindset that's driven me to be who I am.
And you stand on the shoulders of giants and all that, don't you?
But I want the whole team to have that mindset and just be that little bit better.
Yeah.
Every single day, every single month, every single year than they were before.
Yes. Oh, totally.
And have that kind of open-mindedness. And we'll invest in training because actually it makes them better at what they do and makes them better individuals and makes them enjoy what they're doing.
And it's better for their motivation and it's better for their loyalty to the company. And there are so many benefits that you get from training people. And, how do you measure the cost of the benefits? But, what's the cost if you don't train people?
Yeah.
And the turnover of people increases if you don't train them, and turnover is really expensive, like 10 grand to replace a person. So why would you not spend 50 quid on training? So I think training's such a misunderstood area. And I do think there are quite a lot of trainers who are not very good, who get away with it. Lots of good trainers as well, of course. But the thing is, there's no quality control. There's no exam you have to pass or anything to be a trainer. There's not much barrier to entry, so anybody can just turn up and do it badly.
Yeah.
And so it's quite an uncontrolled. I mean, you can do accredited training courses, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So normal training is. But then you see managers, they don't have to pass a test. I mean, there are some management qualifications out there, but most managers are not qualified.
No.
And then most management trainers are not qualified. It's bizarre. To be a fireman, quite rightly, you have to be trained for probably 6 months. But to run a company of thousands of people, no training required whatsoever.
There we are. Shall we delve into a couple of subjects, Chris? That's a brilliant background on your world and the training world. And
you got a longer answer than you expected, didn't you?
Anyway. We've got some really insightful insights there as well, so that's great. But shall we have a little chat around time management, which I know is one of your pet subjects? And I suppose I'd kick off that with, when you're called in to speak to somebody, an individual or an organisation about improving time management, what are the key mistakes that are being made, in your opinion, and what can be done to overcome them?
If a manager is too busy, if it's a manager that's the problem, or a group of managers, I would always look at delegation first.
Right.
Because my customers really do divide into people who can delegate and people who can't.
Okay.
And you can immediately tell on the phone in 30 seconds, by the way, because the delegator will have plenty of time and they'll just, when you ring them up, they'll be there and they'll just say, brilliant, let's do it, come in and do it. And they'll leave it to me.
Yeah.
And then the non-delegator, the control freak, will say, I want to know everything that you're going to cover and why are you doing that? And are you sure you should be doing that? And in fact, they won't even do that. You won't be able to get hold of them because they'll be busy. Oh, he's still in another meeting. He's busy interfering with somebody else before he can come around and interfere with you. And so, it's like somebody comes around to service your boiler. Do you stand over them going, why are you using those pliers? Why don't you use a green wire instead of a red wire? You wouldn't do that, would you?
No.
You're paying him or her to do that job and you would let them do it. But when I come in to do a training course, why do about 25% of my customers go, why are you doing this? Let me do my job. It's what I do. So that's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So delegation is the key
Delegation's
thing.
huge.
So how do you get somebody that doesn't or can't or doesn't delegate to delegate?
Well, I suppose I'll answer the rest of time management in a minute, but just while we're on delegating, I think the first thing is to work out why they don't do it, because there are lots of reasons why people don't delegate, like fear it will go wrong, for example, or I can do it better than them. And every reason to not delegate is false.
Yeah.
So fear of it going wrong, if you monitor, it can't go wrong. If you check on them every day or if you check it before it gets sent out or whatever, it can't go wrong. But people have this fear, what if it goes wrong? And it's not a question of either you monitor or you don't. There's a sliding scale. So you can monitor less often.
Yeah.
And you can get to the point where you check once a week, once a month or whatever. And eventually you can decide you trust them and then you can just let them do it. So the fear of it going wrong is a completely misguided fear. And then this argument that they'll not do it as well as you, that is probably true. But if they do it 80 or 90% as well as you, then that's going to be absolutely fine, especially as that last 10% is probably in your mind anyway. And you're thinking, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. And it's slightly different, but it's still fine.
But the result is the same.
Yes. And the point is, even if it is 10% less great, you've freed up 100% of your time.
Yeah.
So you've saved all that time to do something more important, because there's the opportunity cost of what you could have done with your time when you were doing a job that you should have delegated.
Yeah.
So if you start to really drill into it, you can show people that the benefits are huge. And one of my favourite statistics, I don't know if I stole it or made it up, but if you can save 1 hour a week by delegating a bit more, then, or doing anything, actually saying no or whatever, if you can save an hour a week, that saves you, let's say, 50 hours a year. So let's call that a whole working week.
Yeah.
A bit more than a working week, probably, I hope.
Yeah.
So that's, you could save a week. And if you've got, let's say you've got 10 people who work for you and you give them each 1 more hour a week, which they won't even notice.
Yeah.
And they'll probably be pleased to be given.
Yeah.
Oh, at last, he's letting me do
empowerment,
it.
isn't it? Yeah.
Then you can save 10 hours a week. You could save 10 weeks a year. So, and this is not 10 crap weeks that are full of meetings and interruptions and emails. This is 10 weeks of pure empty time.
Yeah.
Imagine if you could have the whole of January, the whole of February, and half of March just off.
Free. Productive.
I mean, I'd go on holiday for January, just take a month skiing or something. But you could still have all of February and all of March, half of March, just to think.
Yeah.
And come up with ideas and improve things and motivate your workforce and, just so many things you could do.
Yeah, and that's simply an hour a week.
And that's, it's huge. And so delegating is such an easy win. And a lot of managers are bad about it because they care.
Yeah.
It's not because they're bad. I mean, if you're a control freak, for example, I've delegated the garden to my wife, right? She can do what she likes in there. Plant what you like, dig it all up. I don't care. But that's because I don't care about the garden.
Yeah.
So that's not very big of me, is it?
Yeah, that's not.
But, delegating the organising of my CD collection, oh no.
Yeah.
They have to be alphabetical, and within artists, they have to be chronological, and no one's allowed to touch them. So something that you care about, to delegate that is much more difficult.
Yeah.
So if you care, it is difficult. I think it's probably the most important management skill, actually, delegating.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to do.
It is. It takes a long time, and you naturally can do it, or it takes a long time to learn.
Especially if you're an entrepreneur and you've set your company up because you're the best person at doing it. And then you've got to delegate to people who are slightly less good as you are. But how will they ever be better than you? You have to start. So if they can do it 80% as well as you should give it to them.
Yeah.
And just don't look at that last 20%. Just think it's good enough.
Yeah.
And then they'll get to 90, 100. They'll probably get to 120.
Yeah.
Which will feel great. I love it.
Brilliant.
When somebody's better than I am and I can just give it to them and they do it.
Don't we?
Never happens, of course. But just occasionally you find somebody really good and it is such a pleasure to give it to them and they just run with it.
Yeah.
So delegating can be really enjoyable when it works well.
But it takes some perseverance because it doesn't always go well.
Yeah. So delegating, it doesn't always go well. And it's tempting to take the whole thing back.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I can talk about Hitler. Can I, briefly?
Briefly.
Because I've got TiVo and it records programs it thinks I will like.
Okay.
Based on some algorithm, I don't know. And of course it looks at what my kids watch and what my wife watches and thinks it's all me. So it mushes it all together into some weird algorithm. It thinks, wow, this guy's odd. And it keeps recording programs about Hitler. And I'm not particularly interested in him. I mean, there are some interesting things to do with the Second World War, of course, and we can definitely learn lessons.
Yeah, we learn a load.
I hope we've learned the lessons from it. But there was one really fascinating program about Hitler's management style. And apparently, at the beginning of the war, he was, of all the things you thought we'd talk about on this podcast.
I didn't think we'd be going here, listeners.
But at the beginning of the war, he was really into empowerment.
Okay.
And he just said to his tank commanders, get me France.
Yeah.
They had to get past the Maginot Line, and there was sort of massive fortifications between France and Germany, but they'd missed a bit. I think it was the Ardennes forest, and there were lots of trees, and they thought tanks can't go through trees; it'll be all right. But of course, the Panzer tanks could go through the trees. So anyway, he empowered the tank commanders and just let them do what they liked.
Yeah.
And they went charging through the forest right across France, got to Paris, France collapsed, and it was really, really successful for the Germans. And so Hitler was Mr. Empowerment at the beginning of the war, and it worked really well. But later on during the war, things started to go wrong for him. I think it was because he'd attacked Russia, and that was the Eastern Front was draining all his energies, all his resources. And things were going wrong. And what he did when things go wrong is what managers do. He started to pull everything back and say, right, because you've made some mistakes, I want to check everything. Don't do anything without checking with me first. And obviously, he's not a guy you want to argue with. No. So they used to check everything first with him, and he became a total control freak. And apparently when the D-Day landings were happening, it was at dawn, and he was asleep in his castle in Austria, and nobody wanted to wake him up because he was quite grumpy in the mornings, and there's nothing worse than a grumpy Hitler.
Grumpy old man.
Yeah. So nobody wanted to wake Hitler up and tell him that there was an attack happening, and he might literally shoot the messenger, you know. Yeah. So for several vital hours, they couldn't make a decision. Nobody knew what to do. Tanks were not mobilized. The Germans did nothing. And when he finally got word of what to happen, he was like, right, do this. And it was too late. Yeah. And the Allies had got their foothold in France, and everything was different. And so I thought that was fascinating because it is our natural reaction when something goes wrong to say, right, you burnt those cakes. I'm going to do all the cooking from now on forever. Yeah. But what you should do is say, well, why did you burn the cakes? What have you learnt? Okay, brilliant. We fixed that forever now. Yeah. I trust you. I know you can do it again. Or even have another go while I watch just to check you got it. You can learn from it. But if you pull it back into yourself, then everything gets worse.
Yes. We had a great guest on the podcast a few weeks ago about, how do you run your business like a Formula One team? And one of his key takeaways from that podcast was that Formula One teams constantly make mistakes, but they always have a debrief and they learn from them. And then they trust in their people again.
Yes.
And they evolve and they develop.
And if you punish mistakes, people just hide them and then they just keep happening, and it's just stupid, isn't it?
So we've got off track a little bit. Should we come back to time management?
Yeah. So, if it's not delegating, then there are all sorts of things it could be. So we haven't got time to do a whole time management course, but a couple of things of interest. One is people confuse importance and urgency. Yeah. And a lot of people's strategy of dealing with life is just to do the most urgent thing first. Yeah. And that's what they do. But of course, if you do that, there are some things you never get around to. You never get around to things that are important but not urgent, like long-term planning. It just never gets on the radar. And a lot of managers just run around on fire every day, and they love firefighting. Yeah. It's macho. They feel good, but actually that's not what they're for. No. And really, if there's a crisis, you should sort the crisis, but then you should think, why has that happened? You should kick yourself for it happening. Yeah. And you should think, never again. I'm going to get to the underlying cause and fix it. And so, but often they don't want to talk about the underlying cause because the underlying cause is them, because they haven't set a system up or trained people or whatever. Yeah. So just focusing on urgent stuff all the time is a really bad idea. And ideally, you'd spend half your day on important things, and every day you do something that's important but not urgent. Yeah. And often people have never really made that distinction. They just assume because it's urgent, it must be important. Yeah. And because it's not urgent, it can't be important. And actually, there's a huge difference.
Yeah, huge, isn't there?
So that's one thing that is worth understanding. Another obsession of mine is goals. And I know you're into goals as well. And one of the things that changed my life more than anything else probably was writing down my goals years and years ago. I actually did it when I was working at the shock absorber factory in South Wales, where the guy used to phone me up and shout at me. And it was just pure chance, really, that this friend of mine had got this book. I can't even remember the name of the title, but it was something like How to Make Millions of Pounds Without Doing Any Work or something like that. And
one of those mythical books.
How to be successful. It had a bloke in a suit and a rainbow on the cover, I think. And anyway, it said successful people have goals. You've got to write your goals down. Yeah. And I could see the point of that. You set a goal with your sat-nav, don't you? You don't just drive at random and hope you end up somewhere good. And life's like that as well. So I wrote a list of goals, and a few years later, I realised they'd all happened. Yeah, which is quite a weird feeling. I'd forgotten all about the piece of paper. I found the piece of paper. And so I wrote a second list. And my second list actually was quite a weird, it only had 2 things on it. Okay. And I just wrote, to find a job I really enjoy. By this time I was working at Dolphin Packaging. Yeah. I put to find a job I really enjoy and to only work 2 or 3 days a week.
Right.
Because I was working 6 days a week and I hated it. And the university came along because of that. And that was a job I loved. And we did 100 days a year of teaching, which is 2 or 3 days a week. And I just thought, oh my God, it's happened again. So I've carried on writing down goals. You should see my list now. It's huge.
Hey, good.
And, for example, about 5 years ago, I wrote down to record some of my training courses and get them on the internet.
Yeah.
Because I thought if I could get somebody to pay, say, £1 for a whole day of time management training, let's say, why would you not? Maybe 1 million people might pay £1. You'd never know. Yeah. And I wrote that down as a goal to record and get them. And that happened through a series of weird coincidences. I ended up on LinkedIn Learning. I've got a load of courses on there now, and they do send me money every month. And that's turned out to be... And so, it has been massive. So I keep writing down goals. And I think part of time management is to think what's important to me. And that is the same question as what are my goals? Because your goals tell you what's important. So, if you've got a goal to sell more to Scotland, let's say, then that means that Scottish customers are important. And if somebody phones up and says, hello, I'm from Inverness, they're important because they contribute
to your focus, doesn't it?
Yeah. And even deciding whether you want to go for turnover or profit or interesting work or growth. I mean, a lot of companies haven't even thought their way through that.
No.
So you've got to have really clear goals for the company and yourself. And that is a difficult question. It's the one thing I can't tell you the answer to. What are your goals?
No.
The answer is, I don't know. You've got to decide.
Individual to every individual, and every business is different as well.
I can tell you what some of mine are, but mine will be totally different to yours. Yeah. Because I like eating curry and playing the saxophone and running my fingers through the luxuriant fur of my dog. But that's not everybody's idea of fun, I do love dogs. I don't know, something about them. Don't know why. Yeah.
Dogs, not cats, then.
No, don't like cats. No, they're fickle and mean. Whereas dogs, they put up with anything.
Right.
And they're just loyal and so I don't know. But so everyone's different, aren't they? And so if you've got a goal to have 10 cats, that's absolutely fine. And I think a lot of problems happen in the world because we've got different goals and people try to make you have their goals. You should be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. And why can't we all have our own things that we want to do?
But unless you've got clarity of what is important to you and what your own goals are, then you do become subservient to others, don't you?
Yes.
That's human nature. And therefore you become subservient and you become unhappy as a result.
And some people just turn up to work and go, okay, what shall I do today, boss? Yeah. Or what are the problems that need solving today?
Yeah.
And really, that's just reacting.
Yeah.
But once you know what your goals are, you can think, well, this is what's important to me. I'm going to try and find 5 more customers in Scotland or whatever it might be, or I'm going to design a new product that will sell really well in America or whatever. And then you've got that goal and you can work on it. And it feels good. It makes you happier to be moving towards an objective.
Yeah. And bliss is when, an individual's goals are coherent or aligned to those goals of the organisation in which they operate and work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say to people, you might find your goals are only 90% aligned because you won't
get complete
some
aligned.
Bits of your job that you don't enjoy as much as others. But even then, you can say to your boss, can I do more of this and less of this? Because this is the bit I really like. And your boss will probably be delighted. And they're probably thinking, who can I give this to? So that's why appraisals are so vital. Because then you can make sure your goals are as aligned as possible. And there might be a bit of compromise, but that's what you've got to aim for. And if somebody's goals just really don't align with the company, then they should look for another job. And there's nothing wrong with saying that.
No.
And I do say that on my time management day, actually. I say that if you don't enjoy your job or you can't see where it's going, if it's not moving towards something that excites you, you should look for another job. Possibly within the company, but probably somewhere else. And what I like to ask people is, if one of you thought, oh my God, he's right, and left the company because of what I've said, would I have done them a favour? And the answer is yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Would I have done the company a favour? And the answer is yes, definitely. Because that person will be replaced by somebody who loves that job. Someone who at the moment is desperate to do that job and would love to do it. And you're sitting in that chair instead of them. And the great thing about people is that they're so weird. So there is somebody who loves filing And there is somebody else who loves handling complaints, and and there's somebody else who loves cold calling and all these jobs that other people don't.
We're all different as humans, aren't we?
And so there is somebody out there who will love that job if you can find them.
Yeah.
So that's another big part of time management, I think, of working out what you want to spend your time on.
Yeah.
And if I can squeeze in one more thing about time
management. One
more,
go on.
Yeah, which is just that I think the objective of time management is to maximize the time you spend on important things, right? But how do you do that? And it's partly working out what's important, which we've talked about. But how do you maximize your time on anything? Because it's fixed. And the answer is you have to minimize the time you spend on unimportant things.
Okay. Yeah.
And you can do that by saying no, or negotiating, or delegating, or having efficient systems, or not being so fussy, or whatever. There's lots of things you can do to minimize the time you spend on unimportant things. And I used to worry that time management was a bit negative, because it's all about saying no and, minimizing. And so the how of time management is a bit negative. But the why of time management is very positive.
Absolutely.
So you have to somehow minimize that so that you can then have more time for the things that really matter. And that's the positive part of achieving your goals. So it's the difference between the why and the how.
Okay.
And I worked that out. Thank you very much. But it's taken me years. It's taken me years to understand
60 years of life.
Really, and in fact, I probably read it somewhere and internalized it and then thought I'd thought of it.
That's what we all do.
Yeah.
You often talk about, I suppose it follows on from that, about that conversation we're just having, really. You often talk about that value of doing the things that scare you.
Yeah.
And therefore, I wonder whether we could just touch on that element of, something that you're very passionate about, but how can somebody learn or condition themselves to be braver to do the things that scare them?
Yeah. By the way, I'm really bad at doing the things that scare me.
Yeah.
I've got to admit. And, some of the people you've interviewed on this podcast have been amazingly fearless. But I'm a coward, really. And I think when I've spoken up against bosses, it's been stupidity on my part. I really do think. And when I've done jobs which were on the edge of my comfort zone, like, for example, I was asked, it was a website called lynda.com years ago, and it's become LinkedIn Learning now.
Okay.
And they said, would you like to contribute a project management course to our website? And I said, can I send you one I've already made? And they said, no, you've got to come here and be filmed. And I said, where are you? And they said, Los Angeles. And I actually said, no, like an idiot. I just said, oh, no, I don't fancy that. And they said, are you sure? You do realize who we are? And I didn't really, I didn't know how big they were. And I said, well, would I get paid? And they said, oh, yeah. They told me how much they're going to pay me. And when I heard how much it was, I said, right, when can I start?
The next flight?
Yeah. And I was on a plane. Within a few weeks, I was on a plane to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And when I got there, I thought I can talk all day about project management. This is easy.
Yeah.
But when I got there was this whole studio with a director, a producer, a lighting person, a sound person, someone doing the auto cue, someone doing makeup, 2 cameras, 4K, massive great lenses. And I had to stand on this X with all these lights pointing at me. And they went, okay, roll. And I was just terrified. And, my hands were sweating, and I'd never even talked to a camera before. I'm used to talking to an audience, getting some feedback and things. And it was so difficult. And they kept going, okay, can we do one more? They said, Chris, that was good. But, and I thought, oh, it obviously wasn't. Can we do one more take? And can you shorten that story? And I was going, oh, God, I can't remember what I've said now. Can you do it again?
I'm doing this off cuff.
Yes. But, can you not use that expletive word? Or can you do it again, but do that? And I was so frazzled. I was jet lagged as well.
Yeah.
And it was utter stupidity of mine to have just thought I can just go and do this. And in the end, we did it. And it took a whole week, and we got a really good course, and they asked me back to do more. And now when I go back to do filming, I prepare it really carefully. And I spend months writing it and honing it and making sure it's perfect before I go.
Yeah.
But that first time, if I'd known what it was going to be like, I think I would have chickened out of doing it.
Yeah.
But it was just stupidity, really. But I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah.
Because it's been brilliant.
Transformed your business.
Yes, and it's led to work, and it's been interesting and fun, and it's felt really satisfying to record my stuff in really good quality video. it's like you've been doing live gigs in a band your whole life and you go into a studio and record it all with great session musicians. It feels great and it's been financially good. But so I'm really not claiming to be brave. Most of the things I've done, I've just said yes because a customer has asked me. Yeah. And I thought, I think I can do that. And then I've discovered it was harder than I thought. And I've had to work really hard to do it. So I do think there's an element of just taking the plunge.
Just taking that first step.
At the moment, I've got a coach. Okay. And I haven't had a coach for years because I don't want them to push me out of my comfort zone because I'm basically lazy. And, I earn a reasonable living. Why should I come out of my comfort zone? But I sort of stupidly hired this coach. And he's been pushing me out of my comfort zone. And I'd really recommend having a coach because they will push you out of your comfort zone. And once you've taken the plunge and signed up, you've then kind of got to do it.
Committed.
Especially if it's quite an expensive coach, which mine is. I have to do what he tells me because I'm thinking, well, I'm paying him. I've got to do it. So
does your argumentative nature not come out? You talked about that earlier, when you're... And you've been very independently minded for 20 years, then to have somebody coaching you.
Once you're self-employed, you can't have a boss, can you? I can never go back to that. And also, if you do training courses, you're used to being right because you turn up, you're the expert. Yeah. And I am the expert on a small number of things. And there's the rest of the world I know nothing about. I admit that. But there's a few things I know about. So...
I think having coaches are vitally important now. I would say that with an Evolve hat on, but it's changed my life, coaches that I've had that have helped develop and make me just think differently or challenge
I'm kicking myself for not having a coach before. But even when I go skiing, I think I don't want lessons because he's only going to criticise me. And actually, of course, it's brilliant to have lessons because you get better and you enjoy it more. And you've got to have a coach. And I've found someone a guy who I do respect. You don't know him. I mean, I've never met him. We just do it all over the internet, over Zoom. Okay. He's actually in Portugal, but he's Swiss. I mean, it's bizarre. But he's an expert on helping people market training courses online. Okay. So
he's got a very specific niche.
Yeah, and that's why I liked him because he's done it for lots of people a bit like me. And I looked at what he does. And he's also very systematic and kind of engineering. He's not a gung-ho inspirational person. He is like, I have a system. You follow my system. It will work. And I just do what he tells me and it works. Yeah. And no point in lots of detail, but just, I know you want to know what I've been doing with him, probably. So very briefly, two things. Firstly, when I sell a training course on Udemy, they price it at sort of 80 quid, but it's always reduced to £10. That's their model. Everybody buys everything for 10 quid on Udemy.
Whatever it's priced
Udemy.com. Yeah. And I only get 3 quid out of the 10. So I'm selling my courses for 3 quid. Now, I don't really mind because I sell thousands.
Yeah, it's passive, isn't it? And
it's passive. So it does work out well, but it's only 3 quid a course. And this coach of mine, who's actually called Till Boadella, it's a great name.
Great name,
Till
isn't it?
Boadella. But he said to me, why don't you sell your courses on your own website for a decent price? And I said, because they're on Udemy for 10 quid. So if I sell them for 100, who's going to buy them? How do I get around that problem? And he said, well, make a bundle. So put a whole load of courses in there for, say, 200 quid and bundle it with some audio and a bit of coaching and some support and some quizzes and just make a whole package and sell it for 200 quid. And I thought, that's an interesting idea. I've never thought about that. So with his help, I did that. Called it the Life Skills Collection. And did that. And we sold 200 for 200 quid, which is 40 grand, just like that. And that more than paid for a year of him already. So that was really interesting. And that is now on there. And later we're going to get to what he calls making it evergreen, because you can have an automated sales funnel process where there are YouTube videos that advertise it and people look at the video, they like it, they click, they go through, they buy the Life Skills Collection for 200 quid. So you can have this passive thing. And he knows all about setting up automatic funnels that do all that kind of thing. But then the second part, he said to me, right, now you need a high ticket offer. And I just don't know anything about any of this. I've spent years creating stuff that I'm interested in.
And you deliver it physically.
Yeah, but never passive income stuff and never the marketing side. So I have all these ideas like, which of the 6 animals are you and all these things, but I've never marketed any of that really. No. I just stick it on my website and no one looks at it. That's and we probably all do that kind of thing.
Definitely.
But this guy's a marketing expert and he's taking me so out of my comfort zone. So I thought the high ticket offer is something that people will pay £1,000 or £2,000 a month for maybe 6 months. What would somebody pay me $6,000 for? And I was thinking, a weekend of personal teaching with Chris in a spa or something like that, or, we'll go to Barbados, a select group of 5 people,
retreat type
Tony
thing,
Robbins does that kind of thing. But I just thought, I don't know, that's not really me to do that. I don't know. But anyway, he said to me, well, keep thinking about it because there will be an answer. You've just got to find it. And I suddenly realized that there is demand for other people to learn how to get into training. Yeah. And for years, people have said to me, I'd like to do what you do. And I've said to them, it's harder than you realize because it is hard work. Yeah. And, and I've never got into the idea of teaching them how to do it. I always thought, why would I teach a competitor? But, I'm at the point now where I'm reducing the amount of day to day. I don't want to drive to Manchester to talk to 6 people anymore now, but I could teach somebody else how to do that. Yeah. And if I can teach you how to earn a living of between 50 to 100 grand a year, and it's fun, training pays about £1,000 a day. So if you just do 1 day a week, that's 50 grand a year for a day a week. And at the moment, it's all over Zoom. Yeah. But if you do 3 1 hour Zoom, you can charge about £300 an hour for a Zoom training session because they've got 30 people. It's 10 quid a head. So if you do 3 hours a week of Zoom, that's about £1,000 a week. It's about 50 grand for 3 hours, and you can do it in your pants. So I know how to sell and deliver training, and I can teach other people. So with the help of this coach, I've set up this little thing which I've called Successful Trainers, and I can teach you how to be a successful trainer. And I'm working with, I've got 11 people in my little gang, and it's really great because they all compare notes with each other. Yeah. And I do a group call with them twice a week where they can ask me anything. And each week I give them the next step. And I've got this whole series of things which I'm going to show them. And it starts with, setting up your website and brand and logo and all that sort of thing. And then it's like writing the material, and then it's selling it, and then it's delivering it. And then it's putting it online and getting some passive income. So I've worked out this whole program. It's basically just what's in my head written down, but it's not just a training course. It's kind of coaching because they ask me questions.
It's cohort thing, isn't it? You then put a cohort together that will support each other.
And they're showing me the website. What do you think? And I'm saying, well, I wouldn't have that. And they're showing me videos they've made for YouTube, and I'm saying it's a bit long, or do this, do that. Yeah. And they're asking me questions about what sort of microphone to use and all kinds of things. So they've got me available, and we have a Slack group where we just send each other messages the whole time, and they all are doing different subjects, so they can pass work to each other if they sell it and everything. It's this little network. So that's been fascinating. But I've been well out of my comfort zone doing it. And it's all because this coach has pulled me out of my comfort zone.
And made you do something different.
Yeah. So I do think one way to get courage is to have a coach. But of course, your goals also force you to have courage as well. Yeah. Because if you set a goal that makes you almost anxious, if you think, well, I'd like to, be on telly or something, then I don't think that's a very good goal actually. But then you suddenly think, oh my God, how am I going to do that? And a good goal makes you feel almost, or even just. So I've got a goal, for example, Lloyd and I've got this goal to drive across India, and we're going to hire a car. Come with us if you want.
That's an invitation and a half.
Yeah, and we're going to hire a car, some big crash-proof, sort of big thing, and drive across India. And we're probably going to take a month and eat fantastic food and meet great people on the way, because Lloyd was born in India, and I love India. I've been there several times. It's my favourite country. It's just a brilliant place. Driving's pretty hairy there.
I can only imagine.
But what the hell, we can do it, and we'll have insurance, and if we dent the car a bit, so what? It's only money. Yeah. So we're going to do that. And our wives are not very impressed by that.
I can only imagine.
They don't want to come, and they also don't want us to go. But if you've got a goal like that, it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, because you think, how are we going to do that? What's it going to be like? What if it goes wrong? So I do think goals pull you out of your comfort zone as well. Definitely. But I have noticed that happiness comes from coming out of my comfort zone. And in fact, I've got one more brilliant example I've got to tell you about, because it goes back to me being stupid, really. Some friends of mine said, would you like to come trekking in the Himalayas? And I just thought, yeah, I quite fancy a nice walk. And
thinking it's a Brecon Beacon.
Yeah, and I thought I'll buy some nice walking boots and it'll be fine. And we'll look at lovely monasteries and monks chanting and, it'd be really cool, wouldn't it? So I said yes to this. And my friend Steve was organising it and his wife, Rita, was going. I thought, if Rita can do it, I can do it. I thought to myself. Because Steve's a bit of a crazy guy, but Rita's very sensible. So I thought it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And my wife liked the idea of it. So we said yes. And then they said, right, there's a briefing with the travel agent. I went, do we need a briefing? And I went, all right then. So we went to this briefing and the guy said, here's an equipment list, a kit list. And it had things like a 5-season sleeping bag. I'm thinking, well, what's that? There's only 4 seasons. But a 5-season is a really warm. Yeah. It takes you down to like -50. And I'm thinking, what? And then they kept mentioning, when we get to EBC, you'll need this and that. And I said, excuse me, what's EBC? And they went, well, Everest Base Camp, obviously. And I went, hang on a minute. We're not going there, are we? Yeah, we're going there. And I sort of thought, well, it's only base camp, so maybe that's all right, But Everest Base Camp is higher than the top of Kilimanjaro. Yeah. But anyway, I sort of said I'd do it. So I just thought,
You're committed.
Yeah. So again, I'm taken out of my comfort zone by utter stupidity, really. And so we did this trek and sure enough, it was complete hell.
Yeah.
So it was so cold at night. You had to sleep with your camera in your sleeping bag because otherwise the batteries would go flat. So you had all this stuff clanking around in your sleeping bag. And in fact, you slept with a bottle of wee with you to keep you warm. But in the morning, when you wake up, you've got this cold bottle of wee. It was really crazy stuff. And I twisted my ankle stupidly. And so that didn't help. So I was like bandaged, but I carried on because that's the sort of guy I am. And we made it. We got all the way to Everest Base Camp and all the way back. And it was an incredible achievement. And I was thinking about, I was well out of my comfort zone, but I was thinking about, did it make me happy? Because every night, as we crawled into our tent, totally exhausted and freezing cold. And by the way, I went from blowing my nose to just snorting it out, to just letting it run down my face, And I went from getting changed into pajamas to just sleeping in my underwear to sleeping fully clothed. Yeah. By the end, I was so exhausted. By the end, I just didn't care.
Yeah.
And I was just filthy, unshaven, smelly. I just didn't care. It was literally that. I was almost just hardly surviving, And you go off your food at altitude. Food tastes horrible. And you've got the runs. There's no toilets. You have to go behind a boulder. I can't tell you. But it's sort of stuff that Lloyd does every day. But to me, it was just like, wow, that's in my comfort zone. Yeah. And every night I used to think, for the same money, I could be lying on a beach in the Maldives with somebody feeding me grapes while I lie there. What am I doing? And so I would say there was a big downward peak of a peak of unhappiness while I was doing it. But you did get an amazing feeling of achievement. And it was fantastic to see Mount Everest and to look up and to think, there's another 2 kilometers vertically. How can anybody climb that? And it was amazing to have, and the mountains were spectacularly beautiful. In the evening, the sun lights them up and they all turn like a golden color. And you're down in the valley and there were some amazing things that we saw and did. And I'm so glad I did it now.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you can imagine a graph where there's a big downwards peak at the time, but then there's residual happiness you get forever afterwards, looking back thinking, wow, what a great trip that was. Whereas if you never go out of your comfort zone, you don't get that residual happiness.
Troughs and peaks and no residual.
And
residual happiness. I love that.
Yeah, and I bet everyone can think about trips they've been on, walks, cycle trips, where maybe it tipped down with rain or whatever. And at the time, you were probably a bit cold and unhappy. Yeah. But you look back thinking, God, that was epic. Do you remember? That was hilarious. Do you remember that time when we fell in the river by mistake, or couldn't get the car started and we had to sleep? And, but you look back and you think, wasn't that great?
Yeah.
And so
it creates memories as well. And I think as human beings, we need those. Don't we?
So you grow as well, of course.
Yeah.
But the main thing is, you're right. Coming out of your comfort zone creates all those memories, which add to your apparently there's two types of happiness. So there's what's called hedonistic happiness, which is happiness you just get at the time.
Short term.
Eating that curry.
Instant fix.
And so hedonistic happiness was pretty much negative on the Everest trek.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But then you've got what's called eudaimonic happiness, eudaimonia, which is Greek for happiness, apparently. And that, your eudaimonic happiness, is your sort of life satisfaction of looking back, thinking, I did that, and I'm glad I did that because it was great.
Wow.
So things like achievement do add to your residual happiness, your eudaimonic happiness. And the game is to try to do both. But hedonistic happiness often leads to less happiness later.
Yeah, usually has a consequence.
Yes, has a consequence of some sort.
Yeah.
Everything from, having an affair to just drinking too much or whatever. Yeah. So there's a weird sort of thing where you have to suffer to have happiness later. Or if you go for a lot of temporary happiness, it maybe makes you less happy later.
Yeah.
So, the game is to try to get enough of both. Try to, enjoy
live
eating
life
curry.
in balance. Now, that's a challenge.
It is a real challenge. Yeah, absolutely. So coming out of your comfort zone is one of the sources of happiness. Brilliant. There are many others, of course.
There is. I often end with a question around that definition of success, Chris, but I did see you wrote a very interesting blog post on your website about attending your Cambridge University reunion.
Oh, God,
what it taught you about yourself and the meaning of success. So is it success related? Let's end with that story, shall we?
Yeah. I can remember the story, but I can't quite remember the conclusion, really, because, so I went back to my Cambridge reunion and I was dreading it because I just knew all those Cambridge people would have been really successful. And at the time, I had sort of just started out as a freelance trainer. I think I was earning about 100 grand. So, it was good. And I was working pretty hard to do that. Anyway, when I turned up, there was a Ferrari in the car park, and I thought, oh, here we go.
This is just what I thought it would be.
Yeah. So, we all met at this sort of posh dinner with bow ties on and stuff. And everyone looked the same, only grey, really. It was pretty much the same faces, but we all looked quite a bit older. I think we were 40 or 45 years old at that time, something like that. And the guy who had the Ferrari had set up his own software company. And he'd made some call center software and sold it for millions. And he was always the geek. He was really sort of greasy haired and anarchy. And he still was. He still looked awful and was sitting there missing some teeth, or whatever. But he'd made a whole load of money, and well done to him. I mean, respect. It was great actually to see that he'd done well. And then most of the people I knew were kind of senior managers or partners in law firms and were sort of pretty well paid, but not happy. Yeah. That was what really amazed me. They all said, oh God, I work really long hours and is this what life is? And is this it? And the main problem they had was lack of time. It keeps coming back to that. And they were working really long hours and not particularly enjoying their job, and they didn't really have much of a sense of achievement even, because they were just on this treadmill of sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And some were sort of medical doctors, consultants, but they were doing sort of 6 knee replacements a day, and they were earning 200 grand or whatever. But they were just on this sort of butchery treadmill
of life.
Yeah, and there's no creativity in just doing yet another knee replacement. They were just very skilled people. Don't get me wrong, I'll be eternally grateful when I need a knee replacement, but they are changing people's lives in a way, but they didn't feel. They were just, is that it? And I know a lot of doctors who are not happy, really. And it was fascinating to see that they weren't happy. And they weren't massively rich either. No. There's an inverse correlation between IQ and being a millionaire. So most millionaires don't have a university degree because university degrees get you into a well-paid, safe profession like being a lawyer or an accountant or something like that. And that's great. But the people who really make big money are, they run their own scrapyard or something like that, and they're entrepreneurs. Having said that, making big money doesn't make people happy particularly.
No.
There's
not a direct correlation
there.
No,
there's definitely not. And that's a whole other subject we could talk about. Money is not going to be the answer. So I was fascinated to see the cream of England's education
academic system coming out the other side.
And there they were, not particularly successful monetarily and not particularly happy either.
No.
And I felt reasonably smug, actually, because I was doing okay financially. I was paid as much as they were, but I didn't have a boss. And I didn't really have a care in the world because I just turn up and talk about a subject. And if I lose a customer, it doesn't matter because I've got about 30 customers and it's fine. And I can pick and choose. And so I love being self-employed. It's not for everyone, but for me, it's turned out to be the answer. And so they all thought I was a sort of almost a weird hippie, really. Oh, he's just some self-employed guy who does training courses. Because they were very status orientated. Yeah. Oh, I'm a partner in a law firm and you're just a self-employed trainer. And, but I thought, well, stuff you.
Two fingers that you're unhappy.
But it was really interesting to think about that. And it got me thinking about what is success. And, I do think happiness is the root of everything. Because if it doesn't make you happy, why are you doing it? And if it's well paid, but you're not happy, why are you doing it? And, maybe you're saving up money so you can retire early, but, that means you have to sacrifice your whole life just for early retirement. Yeah. And you might keel over and die the year after. Yeah. And often people who work hard do. So, that's not a good plan. And so I've thought a lot about this. And I think in the end, it boils down to enjoying and achieving.
Yes.
And I think some people enjoy themselves, but they don't achieve anything. And that bugs them in the end.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, the kind of people you interview for this podcast, are really high achievers. But it's really important to enjoy it as well.
Enjoy the moment.
And I think a lot of them do enjoy themselves as well.
Yeah.
But if you're going to achieve, you've got to remember to enjoy it as well. And it sort of goes back to my Everest thing, because ideally you would enjoy it at the time and get a sense of achievement afterwards. And if you can do both, that's really good.
That's a great definition of success.
Yeah. So I think to enjoy and achieve, and so enjoyment is really about the present and achievement is about the future. And because you have to do things now that you may not want to do in order to achieve in the future. You have to come out of your comfort zone. You have to learn new things, get a coach to achieve in the future. So, and I think all we've got is the present and the future, because the past is gone. We can't change that. Yeah. But we can change the present and we can change the future. So enjoy and achieve. And ideally you would do both of those at home and at work, because I think a lot of people's plan is to achieve at work and enjoy themselves at home.
Yeah.
Party on Friday night and Saturday night or whatever. But I don't think that's enough. Yeah. I want to enjoy work as well as achieve. You've got to find a job you enjoy. The search must go on. I'm lucky to have found something I enjoy after a lot of searching. Yeah. But you've got to keep searching. So you've got to enjoy both. And then ideally you would achieve at both as well. So not only achieving at work, but you'd achieve stuff in your personal life. Things that you want to do. And maybe driving across India will give you a sense of achievement, or building your own shed, or coaching a kids' football team, whatever you want to do, but you've got to get a feeling of achievement. And that comes back to goals, of course, because your goals are what do you want to achieve at home and at work? Yeah. And also, what do you want to do that makes you happy at home and at work? And if you write all that down, it will happen.
I agree. And I actually think it's a really, my own personal definition of success is around that holistic success, which is that balance between business, work, career success and personal success. And you see too many people, and, been there myself at times when you'd score an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 personally, and 2 out of 10 in business, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And it's crap. It doesn't feel right.
No.
But if they're both scoring 7s.
The dangerous one is where you sacrifice your home life for your work.
Yeah. And too many people do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can get drawn into the idea of it's only temporary and, I've got to have my career.
I can make it up tomorrow.
Yeah, and of course you never can. You never get that time back. You look at pictures of your kids and it's just gone in a flash when they were little, gone.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It's somehow to be at 7 for both. Yeah. Or even 9 for both.
That's strive for a golden 9.
Yeah, so enjoy and achieve at home and at work. And that's what time management's about, but it's what happiness is about. It's the meaning. That's the meaning of life, I think.
Perfect. What a great way to end the podcast. Chris, if people want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
Just go to chriscroft.com.
chriscroft.com.
Put me into Google, Chris Croft. I'm all over Google. If they want to be a trainer, contact me. I might be able to help coach them to be a trainer. Or if they just want a training course, I'm still doing some of those.
Brilliant.
Just go to chriscroft.com and have a look at my blog, because I'm always writing new stuff. Every few days I put something else, and my blog is very eclectic, very weird and wonderful. Everything that's in my head is gradually being written into my blog. Check that out on chriscroft.com.
Save the world. Yeah. Right, Chris, it's been brilliant to have you as a guest on the podcast. Thank you for being a great guest.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you all took away some interesting content, thoughts, ideas, something practical to implement either in your personal or business life as a result of that podcast. The episode was slightly longer than normal, but with Chris providing such great content, we didn't want to edit it down in any way. Chris clearly has a gift for enlivening topics and concepts with his enthusiasm and humour. It's no wonder he's built such a successful training company. There are so many things I liked about this podcast, especially the conversations around the importance of setting yourself goals and seeking out a profession you truly enjoy, and how putting your focus into achieving success in both your personal and professional life is key to a meaningful existence. These, of course, are concepts that are core to what Evolve is all about. So if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, if you want to find out more about Evolve, if you want more insightful content, details of forthcoming webinars and events, then please do go and register your details at evolvemembers.com. And if you are local to the Poole, Bournemouth area, don't forget that we'll soon be launching our co-working space in Ashley Cross in Poole. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if so, please do rate, review and subscribe to future episodes. I look forward to you joining me again next week. Thank you.